Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I see some friends, some familiar faces, some new faces. Hello, John. Good to see you. Johannes,
Hello.
welcome. Good to see everyone. We're going to let everyone trickle in. I'm joined by my colleague, Marianne Knopp, who's a product manager for our course business. So supercharge your productivity. You see a few alums of the course. Introduce yourselves in the chat. We've got John, we've got Bobby. Those are the few that I could see on the screen so far. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. So I want you to drop into the chat today. Drop in your, we got a little presentation and then we've got some fun Q&A. Drop into the chat your location and then follow it by a comma. And then after the comma, I want you to add when it comes to getting things done, right? The topic of this conversation. What is your biggest challenge? So location, comma, when it comes to getting things done, what is your biggest challenge? So we will let everyone, we'll give one more minute for folks to trickle in. There's 52 lovely faces so far. John, good to see you. Some familiar faces and some new faces. So this is super fun. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, as we'll talk about. I have been immersed in the GTD philosophy since 2003. So that's a good, almost approaching 2 decades now. Have a lot of thoughts on it, have a lot of modifications, and mostly here to help you all answer your questions. Oh, Michelle, another alum. So good to see you. I didn't realize John had a tricep tattoo. Nice. All right, let us get started. So we are going to start the way we're going to run this. So we've got like prepared remarks for about 30 odd minutes, 35 minutes. We're going to start with 2 quick little polls. We use an app called Slido. And oh, John's putting up the book on his bookshelf. So we use an app called Slido for polls and for Q&A. And the way it's really helpful with the Q&A because you can upvote, we have a relatively large group. And so we can upvote the questions that you want to ask. And then we ask if you're up for it in the Q&A, it just says, type in your name. That way I can call you onto stage. And then we can have a back and forth. So fill in your names when you ask the Q&A, upvote the questions. I'll do the Q&A at the end, but drop in the questions throughout the chat so that they can start gathering some votes. So with that, we're going to get started with our first poll that is going to drop into that will be on the Slido link, and it is about your experience with GTD. So tell us a little bit about your GTD experience. If you're not in the Slido link, I will read you the results. It's free. You don't need to log in or anything like that. So fervent fan, parts of it work for me. It never stuck and it is too confusing. I've never tried or heard of it until today. So I will put fervent fan myself. And it looks like we'll let we've got 22 responses, but it looks like about half of you use different parts of it. And so this will be fun because in the back half of the presentation, we're going to look at the modifications that we would do to GTD. A quarter of you found it too confusing, and so it never stuck. And then 20% of you have never tried it. All right, we'll do one more quick poll. This will help us just kind of get a sense of your kind of what context you would use it. So we'd love to hear a little bit about your work environment, what type of company you work for. Are you, salaried employee, or are you self-employed or a consultant or business owner or a student? So I am a business owner of under 10 people. And so we will watch those trickle in. Oops, excuse me. All right, so it looks like we've got a third of you are salaried employees. Then we've got a third are self-employed. small business owners, large business owners, and then a small percentage of students and other. All right, with that, let us jump right in. Marion will be dropping in appropriate links that we've written about throughout the chat. No need to screen grab, clip, all that stuff. We send you a nice tidy package at the end with a recording with all of the links. So you should just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And so without any further ado, let me share my screen and get us started. All right. Hide floating meeting controls. All right. How's it look, Marion?
Great.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to How to Get Things Done in 2022, a free workshop on David Allen's GTD method, a free training for our incredible community. My name is Kehi, and I'm joined by my colleague, Marion Knopp, who is the product manager for Supercharge Your Productivity and our course and community business. So, you might know, or you may or may not know, this was on an interview that David Allen gave with Tim Ferriss, that David Allen had a small number of consulting clients. And so these are one-on-one consulting clients, they're executives. And if you were to get a personal consultation with David Allen, the rumor was that it was $125,000 for the year. So obviously it's a small subset of us who can afford this type of consulting. But this was the interesting part. When you would sit down with David, for the first couple hours, he would just have you download all of your thoughts, your tasks, your idea fragments, anything that was in your head, what David Allen calls open loops, onto a piece of paper. And he said in this interview with Tim Ferriss that for some executives, that would take up to 4 hours, right? So here you are, you've hired this consultant and you sit in a room with a blank piece of paper, downloading your thoughts, idea fragments, tasks, and musings onto a piece of paper, right? And this is why David Allen was really onto something, right? That this concept of open loops, this concept that we'll talk about, your mind is made for having ideas, not holding them, right? And so much of this system is based on getting these ideas, closing these loops, which will bring down your anxiety, allow you to focus and get things done. So we're going to talk about all of that today. I think everyone is on mute, but if you could kindly mute yourselves during the prepared remarks, that would be awesome. So for those of you who don't know me, most of you do, but I want to introduce myself briefly. My name is Kehi. I'm the creator of the Rad Reads blog and email newsletter, which serves, actually, we need to update that, 35,000 high-achieving professionals like yourselves. We run 2 businesses. We teach a course for individual contributors called Supercharge Your Productivity. We run that 3 times a year, and that we just finished the 2nd cohort, so we're not selling you anything. And we run Rad Studio, which is a consultancy for small businesses looking to implement our frameworks into their workflows. Before that, I worked on Wall Street for 15 years. I'm an avid surfer. I surf every day for, close to 2 hours, and I tell a lot of dad jokes. Our mission at Rad Reads is to help you lead a productive, examined, and joyful life. And we think we bring a unique approach, a unique combination to those 3 elements in your life. So, like I said, we help people be more productive, which means get more of the right things done with precision and accuracy. But here's where we differ from a lot of the productivity trainings, is most just stop there. It's just productivity. We take it a step further. We then help you tie that productive desire to understanding what truly matters. what is the vision you have for your life? What are the goals that you have? Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? What are your values, right? And this is actually one of the shortcomings of GTD. It doesn't, there's a few add-ons on this, but it doesn't tell you what truly matters in your life. It tells you how to do what truly matters, but you still have to figure that out for yourself. And then we want it to be filled with joy, right? What's the point if there's no joy? Right. And so we help you find the path of least resistance, the path of ease, the path of effortlessness. That is a big part of our core philosophy. So productive, examined, and joyful life. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about my GTD journey. So in 2001, I graduated from Yale with a computer science degree. And in 2003, I walked into a bookstore, Barnes & Noble's on 5th Avenue and 17th Street in New York City, no longer there. I believe now it is a Coach store, and bought the physical copy of David Allen's book, Getting Things Done. I taught people on Wall Street how to use and apply GTD. If you were on my team, I made you use GTD. I made you read the book, and I taught you how to use a system called OmniFocus, which is kind of an OG system for using GTD. That helped me become one of the youngest managing directors at BlackRock at age 31. I really attribute a lot of that to just being more on top of things than everyone else. I had a third of a life crisis at 35 in 2015, and now I am the founder of Brad Reed's business, where I aim to work 30 hours a week, surf every day, and deliver these types of trainings. And this philosophy has been an anchor to everything that I have done personally and professionally, and continues to influence the methods that we teach. So we're going to start with, why does this matter? We're going to start with a story of Tina. You may know Tina. She also goes by 10K Tina. And so Tina is, on her morning commute. And as she's going on her morning commute, she remembers that she needs to pick up toilet paper, that she needs to email the client the report, and that she needs to get an oil change, right? After her morning commute, Tina is in a boring Monday morning meeting, and she remembers that she needs to book a vacation flight, schedule a one-on-one with her direct report, and wish Grandpa a happy birthday. Then she is able to dip into the gym before lunch and pump a little iron, and she wonders if the Amazon refund hit for the wrong ink cartridge that she ordered, if she made her IRA contribution for the year, and if that she needs to change the smoke alarm in her kid's room, right? So it is barely noon, and already she is overflowing with these little tasks, right? These idea fragments, which are consuming Tina's mind space, need a place to go. But obviously, these don't need to get done immediately. Changing the smoke alarm, there's probably some urgency, but she's actually in the office right now, so she can't change the smoke alarm. Wishing Grandpa a happy birthday, it's, you can't wait until tomorrow. And then the Amazon refund, she wants to know, but it's not that important, but she can't let it go. So where do all these tasks go? And that's the beauty of the GTD system, right? So it's barely noon. You've already lost the day. You're drowning in low value work. There's this behavioral bias, the mere urgency effect. So everything seems urgent, right? The urgent but not important. And the dopamine kicks in. And so all you're doing is react, right? There's the Zeigarnik effect, but we'll save that for a different talk. So here's where GTD comes in, right? And GTD is really a 5-step process. This is basically the process in a nutshell. And what I'm going to walk you through each of these steps, but then give you a distilled way so that you can start applying it right away. The most important step in GTD is this concept of a capture inbox, right? So if you think of the 9 tasks, so let's look at a traditional task manager. Let's say you use Apple Reminders, right? If you were Tina and you had those 9 tasks, every time you remembered the task, you would add it into your into Apple Reminders, but then you would have to go and put it on a list. So the Amazon refund would go into personal, the direct reports one would go into work, and so on and so forth. If you think of like not like the number of taps that you would have to do, there would be, you know, probably close to 27 taps, right? And so you could see you can't just keep stopping to input things into your to-do list. So then they get stuck somewhere, right? That's where they start consuming energy, and that causes anxiety and stress. And so what GTD does is, unlike in this first step of GTD, unlike traditional task management, it inserts a speed bump. So it basically says every time you have a thought, put it in a safe place called a capture inbox, and know that it's going to be there, but you're not putting it into different project lists and adding due dates and all of that stuff. So that's a big first step. There's a trade-off there, right? The trade-off is speed, right? You'll hear GTD people talk about quick capture, right? And so you can capture all these ideas really quickly. You can let them go on with your work. But then later throughout the day, these other parts emerge, right? So that's the capture step. The next step is clarify, right? And clarify, I'm going to show you the steps that I think are really important in GTD, are these red ones. Clarify is basically making sure you have specified a task accurately. So I often, when I used to do productivity coaching, I would look at people's tasks and they'd have something like taxes. Like, that's not a task, that's a project, right? Or a list, if you want to use traditional task management parlance, right? What is taxes, right? It is downloading your W-2s. It is contacting your accountant. It is printing out your receipts. It is a bunch, it's all these filing on TurboTax, right? So filing your taxes is a project. And within that project, you have a series of different tasks, right? So an easy way for you to clarify your tasks is to add an active verb in front of them. So I want you to take away from this, every single task you have should be preceded by an active verb. Look up, talk on GTD, call mom about this, change batteries in fire alarm. So an active word in front, and that will give you the clarify step. Next, you have the critical step. This is the organize step. This is where you add metadata to your tasks, right? And so this is, and we have an entire course on this. So, I'm not doing it justice by just summarizing the step, but basically to take a task out of your capture inbox, you have to assign it onto a project list, right? So if one of your tasks was print out all my receipts, you would then add it to a project that might be called File 2023 Taxes. And once you have assigned it to the project, it leaves your inbox forever. Now, once you put things into different project lists, you have other data you can put. Due dates, DUE dates. You could put tags, right? Like, what device would I use to do this task? Like a phone, is it a phone call? Does it involve a direct report, right? Context or tags are part of this categorization process. GTD is actually anti-prioritization. So they would say you're not allowed to add priorities to your task. And then you could add other things like when you want to do it, like we call those DO dates, a bunch of other metadata. But that is the organizing part of GTD. Next, there's the reflect. GTD is very against due dates. We're going to talk about this. Reflect is basically the weekly review. And we have an entire process that's beyond the scope of this free training, but we run free weekly review trainings as well, where you reflect on the process of, you go through every single task, project list, you look at the task, you update the metadata. And then there's the engage, which is usually, that is the domain of your task manager, which basically is a bunch of different filters that says, show me my things that are due tomorrow. Show me the things that are the next action to move a project forward. Show me all my low energy tasks. Show me all my phone calls, right? These are filtered views for your task list. Again, depending on the different task managers that you would use, you'll have different levels and levers of customizability. So these are the 5 steps of GTD. I want to make the argument that the ones in the red are the most actionable and most relevant. So with that, we want to give you 5 quick wins to make GTD work for you, right? We want you to tag all of your tasks. Actually, we're only going to show 4 on this slide. Use capture inboxes, replace DUE dates with DO dates, and manage your energy instead of your time. And we are going to go through each of these today, and then we'll talk about some of the challenges with GTD in today's environment. All right, so we talked about Tina, all of these ideas. Where do they go? Do you text them to you, email them to yourself? Do they go on a to-do list, to a post-it note? Do they go into a notepad? Do you write them on your forum, right? This is where David Allen famously said, your mind is made for having ideas, not holding them. So the first win that you can have is super simple. I want you to pick 2 capture inboxes. One of them is digital. So ideally, that is a dedicated to-do list app or something like Notion or Coda or one of like no-code apps. If you are in the market for a simple but effective and free to-do list app, we always recommend Todoist as kind of a go-to app that's extremely well designed and free and cross-platform. And then what do you always have near you? A piece of paper. So we encourage you to have 2 capture devices, a task-based one and a digital one and an analog one. And if you want to get a little more creative, voice is very powerful. Most to-do list apps hook into Siri or Hey Google, where you could say, Siri, remind me to call Marion, and then it will just add that as a task into my task manager. So that is win number 1. 2 capture inboxes. Remember, this gets all these ideas out of your head into a safe place. And then later in the day, you will put them in their appropriate home, which is the right project list. All right, so we got this covered, the capture tools. Now, here is a issue that a lot of people run into with GTD, which is, what do you do about email? And specifically, what do you do about emails, about tasks that live in your email? So I'm going to show you 2 examples. This is from one of my consultants, sends an email about SEO, and I am assigned 4 tasks in this email, right? So what normally happens, that email just chills in your inbox because it will take 2 hours to do all of these tasks. You don't want to archive it because you'll never do them. So what you need to do is take these 4 tasks out of your inbox into your capture inbox, and then archive the email. So tasks do not live in emails, right? They need to follow the same process as all the other tasks. This is a similar one when you're filing your taxes. You know, my accountant asks for pay stubs and estimated taxes and brokerage accounts and so on and so forth, right? Again, these are 5 different tasks that need to be extracted from email and put into your task management system. Then there's the infamous email from Jim. This was sent during COVID. Hey friend, I'm going to Bali once they lift COVID restrictions. You went, right? Where should I go? Where should I stay? Any must-sees, right? So you look at this message and it just hangs out in your inbox, right? This message is so unfair. I love Jim and I want to support Jim with his Bali trip, but this email took him 2 seconds to write and is going to take me 20 minutes to respond to. And then on top of that, I need to see it in my inbox every day until I decide to carve out the 20 minutes to respond to Jim. Perfect example why this email does not belong in your inbox. You archive it, you create a task, email Jim the Bali Rex, and then you'll add the metadata accordingly, right? So that is how we treat capture inboxes, right? So the next step that is important in GTD, and this is a very, very important step that often gets overlooked. I want you to think about, when was the last time, drop into the chat, when was the last time you missed one of these payments? Estimated taxes, life insurance, rent, mortgage, right? Now, I'm going to ask you another set of questions. When was the last time you postponed solo time with a child, one-on-one with a direct report, or date night with your partner, right? Now, I'm not seeing the chat, but I suspect that there's a different set of responses for each of these categories, right? And this is going to give us a clue. This is a very important and under-recognized element of GTD, which is you are not allowed to use fake due dates, okay? So you have to get rid of all your DUE dates, or most of your DUE dates. I suspect if I look at all of my tasks, only 5% of them have DUE dates. And what can qualify? You got to look at that first category, right? You only are allowed to use DUE dates if there is a steep and immediate penalty for not completing the task by that item, right? By that due date. So if you don't pay your rent by the rent date, there is a steep, they could file an eviction notice, an immediate penalty for not doing it by that date. Same thing with your life insurance, they'll suspend your policy, right? So those are the only instances when you're allowed to use DUE dates. And I suspect if you go through your tasks, it will probably be under 10% that will fit that threshold. Now, look at the other one. Spending solo, I try to spend solo time with each child, at least like one event, 1 hour a week. If I am not allowed to put a DUE date on that, because there's a penalty for missing that over time, but there is not a significant and immediate penalty for missing it. So I've got to use other mechanisms in a to-do list system to get through that. Now, this raises an obvious question. Well, how do you do what you need to do? How do things not fall through the crack? This is the essence of the weekly review, and we'll drop in a post on the weekly review that shows you how to do this process. All right. So the weekly review. So we have capture inbox. We have no DUE dates. We have this weekly review that needs to be done. We have, like I said, we have separate workshop on that. And this is a summary of win number 2, dropping your due dates. All right. Now, let's get to the next one. These items contain clues. Your morning workout, a cup of coffee, your afternoon sugar craving, and your urge for a 5 p.m. cocktail, right? These are clues into your level of energy, right? And as you remember, GTD calls it context, but I find that word confusing. They're really just tags. So having a useful set of tags for your tasks that will allow you to filter things is very powerful. And we're going to propose 2 sets of tags for you. The first is your energy level, high energy, low energy. This spans all the different tasks in your personal and your professional life. So high energy and low energy. Excuse me. And so you are going to we want you to start thinking with your third win of what does your energy look like throughout the day? So I'm a morning person with young kids, which means that in the mornings are my best moments. And I surf and I exercise during that time. And all of my creative work, my thinking, like we call it 10K thinking, where you're like really asking these why questions, that if it doesn't happen in the morning, there's a good chance it's not going to happen that day. Then after lunch, I hit the yellow zone, where that's most of my meetings. Again, we could talk about the limitations of being a salaried employee. I own my business, and we have a very flexible culture of communication. So all of my meetings are in that yellow zone. And then the red zone, that's the cookie zone. I start to collapse, my energy plummets, I get sleepy, I lose motivation. That is where I do all of my low energy tasks. And so what we want you to do is just take out, after this workshop, take out a little graph, a little piece of paper, and just map your hypothetical energy. Not your hypothetical, map your energy map, and start thinking about your task. Like, is this a low energy? Is this a high energy? And now, obviously, you won't be able to do it one for one, right? Especially if you have a boss, a demanding boss, you have demanding clients, you're going to be limited, but this is a good anchor. This is at the minimum, it's what you should strive for. And by the way, if you have a good relationship with the people you work with, you could tell them, like, I try not to do meetings in the morning because that's when I do my thinking. If someone cares about your thinking, then they will probably give you some leeway on that or some flexibility. And if they don't, then you need to question, the role that you're in. So that is managing energy over time, and we break it up with 10K and $10 work. We're not really going to go through the framework today. All right, and then the last one is prioritize using 10K work, right? So again, we have whole separate trainings, but I want to introduce this to you. This is not part of GTD. This is an add-on that we recommend to use as a tag. And this really finds where is your most impactful work, right? And so $10 work is low skill, low leverage. You could do it hungover. It's checking email, updating OKRs, things like that. $100 work is, processes and systems and tools, and like, it's better than $10 work, but it's not gonna, make your company profitable in and of itself. $1,000 work, high skill, low leverage. It's the thing you get paid to do. If you're a lawyer, it's practicing law. If you're a dentist, it's, oral surgery. If you're a writer, it's writing. And then 10K work is that kind of high leverage, high skill area where you really find the things that you're truly talented at, your zone of genius, and you amplify it. And again, we have a whole different set of trainings that talk about this amplification, this 10K work. But this is a powerful tag that we recommend that you add into your GTD system. Excuse me. So lastly, and this will conclude our remarks, and we'll get into some Q&A. What does GTD look like in 2022? So, when David Allen wrote the book, he, the BlackBerry barely existed. So, we were probably like in between the standard BlackBerry and the BlackBerry Pearl, right? Or like the next generation of BlackBerries. So, a lot of what David Allen talks about in the book is using, manila folders and writing things on lists. And that's the beauty of the system, is that it truly is a system that is tool agnostic, right? But at the same time, it was before mobile phones. It was before social media. It was before inboxes. Like, we have a Twitter DM, WhatsApp DM, email DM, YouTube DM, Spotify, watch later list, like just so many inboxes, right? So it's not, GTD needs a little bit of a revamp in 2022. And so what we will recommend to really make GTD stick for you in 2022 is committing and sticking to the weekly review. I mean, that is hands down the most effective thing you can do. It's where you set all of your tags. It's where you review like your bigger picture, like why am I doing this? And you map progress towards the things that are important in your life. And by the way, it enables the system to run by eliminating the need for DUE dates and so on. Another challenge with GTD is what's called GTD Bankruptcy. Drop into the chat if you've ever struggled with GTD Bankruptcy. And the problem with GTD is that quick capture, it's its strength and its downfall is that it's so easy to add things, right? I could just add things to Siri all day, and I can have 100 things in my list by the end of the day, right? Now, that becomes a problem because if you can't triage fast enough, then you end up, the thing that was supposed to save you mind space ends up overwhelming you. And so that is why we recommend that folks really triage their tasks during the weekly review. And the best way to do that is to just take most task managers will allow you to do this, take all of your tasks and then look at them from oldest to newest. And then if you start to see something that sticks on, for a month, you're not going to do it. Delete it, make it more specific, admit to yourself that you're not going to do it. So that is GTD bankruptcy is a huge, huge challenge. We then encourage you to put a time cap on the 2-minute rule. David Allen made the 2-minute rule famous, which is if you could do the task in 2 minutes, just do it. That doesn't work in this digital age. There's too many things that you can do in under 2 minutes. And that requires some kind of constraint, some kind of modification. That's where a lot of people get stuck is, well, David Allen said I could just do things if they take less than 2 minutes, and you're just doing like, 25, 2 hours worth of 2-minute tasks, right? That's defeating the whole purpose. And then reducing the number of contexts and tags that you have in the system, right? And again, we recommend high energy, low energy as a tag, and then 10K, 1K, 100. And you don't even need to put 10 as a tag. You could just say, if it doesn't have a tag, it's $10 work. So with that, we will open it up to Q&A. I see we've got 5 questions. Some have been upvoted already. So as a reminder, please drop your questions into the Q&A. If you put your name on it, I'll call you onto the stage and I will stop sharing my screen. And then one last word is that we are actually trying something new after this. Is we have our 10K Accelerator Community, which is a monthly community that covers 5 trainings a month live, plus access to all of our courses and a library of like 50 different private trainings that are like specific like this. And we're actually opening up 3 slots. So we'll, on the email, we're actually asking for applications. So we're going to open up 3 slots into our 10K Accelerator. So you'll be hearing from us in the follow-up email. So with that, I will go to the first question that was a resounding winner with 6 upvotes from Anonymous. 6 anonymous folks, but it says, I have a million projects, areas, and goals. How do I know what to work on in the moment without going through a massive list of project areas and goals? So what we like to talk about in our trainings and in our courses is that it actually all starts upstream with a why question, right? And so projects, goals, tasks, things to do, they are all downstream from a much higher calling, right? You could use a lot of different language. It's what's your personal mission? What makes you come alive? What matters most to you? Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years, right? And it turns out that so much anxiety and burnout comes from the same root. And that is goal confusion. Like, I don't know what my goal is, or goal conflict. I have 2 goals, competing goals, right? I want to be a great professional and a great father. And those goals seem to be in conflict with one another, right? So when I read this question, what I'm seeing, I'm just seeing the downstream 5-car pileup of goal confusion and goal conflict. And so I can answer this question with tactics, but that wouldn't be doing justice to the question, because this is actually not a question about tactics. This is a much deeper question about goal clarity, personal mission, and conflicting goals that one has for their lives. So I will answer it with tactics, because that would be unfair for me not to. But I want you to think about what's at the top, right? And so I want you to all ask, I'm going to ask you a question that's going to lead to another question. And the question for each of you is, what is the most important question I should be asking myself right now? And if that feels a little too vague or too open, you could put I'll allow one qualifier. In my personal life, in my professional life. Right. So I want you to think about that. Feel free to drop it into the chat. But the millions of projects, goals, and tasks is probably downstream from not having a set of guiding questions to orient you. Right? So here are some questions that you could, we call these 10K questions. Here are some questions that you might want to ask, that you could consider. What makes me come alive? Right? That could be a personal, I mean, ideally, your professional life makes you come alive. What makes me come alive? Right? There's, if you have a million tasks and, 90% of them don't make you come alive, the tasks might be incorrect, or you might be unaware of what makes you come alive. So that might be a question that you could ask yourself. Another one on the more personal side is, what will bring me enduring peace or contentment or serenity? Right? I imagine that this is an audience of strivers. And so strivers tend to get anxious because they only find peace in striving. But striving is just an act, it's not a destination. So if you only find peace in the act of striving, then you will perpetually be striving, and you will perpetually have some element of dissatisfaction. And so the question might be, how do I find peace? Right? Now we could flip it into something that's more professional, right? If money wasn't an issue, how would I spend my time? Right? Creativity, impact, service, faith, community, right? A lot of different things. You're probably asking yourself, you're saying to yourself, like, "Kay, answer the damn question." You're not answering the question that I have a million tasks and I don't know which one to work on, and you're telling me what makes me come alive. What I'm trying to get you to see is that there's actually a relation, that these overarching questions serve as a filter or a gateway or a spotlight into those things, right? And so you need to have some kind of unifying lens for your wife, for your life, for your work. I said work and life, and it said wife. Some unifying lens for your work and your life to see how it all fits together, or else you're just thrashing, right? And this is actually, I'm glad that this is, it's not surprising that this is the most upvoted question, because this question's not actually answered in the book GTD. The book GTD stays downstream. And so how the book would answer this question is say, okay, I have a million projects and goals. So I would look at a bunch of tags, right? I would basically set up filters. So what filters would I set up? Well, the first filter you might set up is, what do I need to do soon? Like, what has a real DUE date? So you probably would do those things first, right? Like pay your rent and, email the client the proposal and so on. So once you finish those things, then you got a bunch of other stuff left to do. Then GTD would say, what is the next action, right? So what is the next activity that moves a project forward? But there's a baked in assumption here, is that you know what the project is. And there's another baked in assumption, is that the right project towards the right goal. which is why you need to dance between the why and the how. You need to kind of move back and forth between these two things, right? And one of our students, Patrick, he's like, would you rather work on 5,000 tasks that don't matter or work on the 5 that move the needle, right? GTD is not going to tell you how to do that. It can't. It doesn't have enough information. So that's how, hopefully that answers the question of, you got to marry the how with the why. And in the why, you can use, that's where the power of filters and tags and contexts and next actions become quite powerful. But again, all of that presupposes that you're moving towards the right direction. And so let's not forget that, first of all, the right direction is not a binary, right? It's always kind of meandering, right? So it's more like, are you moving towards a lighthouse versus like, I am moving at, 264 degrees northwest today. That was the soul direction for the waves today. Okay. So next question. Mike, how to deal, I don't know if Mike's around, do you want to unmute and ask? I don't see a mic on my first screen, but there's a lot of you. So Mike, if you do want to hop on, I'll read the question. How to deal with denial when starting or continuing a task? How can I find the reason behind the denial by using the why questions? Ooh. Yes, the question of, Stephen Pressfield calls this the resistance, or there is, it's $10 work, or it's procrastination, right? It's like, I can't do this thing, or I can't sustain this thing. Now, there's a few ways to look at it, right? And again, I'm going to answer these questions with tactics, and then with tactics being the how you do it, and then the why question, what's upstream from tactics, because that's really what's going to drive change in your life. Tactics are just band-aids, right? And so the tactical question, actually, let's start with the why, the upstream question. When you are struggling to continue a task, there are a few questions that are at play here, right? And they can be existential questions. So the first one is actually usually not existential, is I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So again, it's a lack of clarity on the task, makes it amorphous, makes it hard to start and hard to sustain, right? So that would be the first kind of why question, like, is the task properly defined, right? Another one is you might just be tired, right? Oftentimes when you're struggling to get through tasks, like you probably just need a nap, or you probably didn't sleep enough. And so that may or may not be an option, but something worth considering. So those are some easier ones. But then you get into some more questions, some questions of identity, right? And so you get into these questions of imposter syndrome, or fear of failure, or perfectionism, right? And these are all identity questions, right? If you have a fear of failure, you hold a certain identity, right? I am a person who is successful, or who does things well, or who gets things right. And if you have a fear of failure, that conception of your identity is at risk. And so it prevents you from moving forward. So the upstream question would really be, is this identity serving me? Right? Perfectionism is another, that's an extreme example of identity and ego protection, right? When you are a perfectionist, you are saying there is only this vision, this identity that can be seen by the world. And if it's anything less than my worthiness is at risk. right? Think about that, right? Perfectionism is a threat to your identity. And so you can force yourself to do the task, or you can look at, is this identity serving me? What identity is it? Right? Perfectionism is a threat to your identity. So is failure. They're actually two sides of the same coin. You're a perfectionist because you don't want to fail. Right? If your failure is because of the identity of not wanting to be a loser or whatnot. So the upstream question, anytime there's resistance, is to examine what's really behind. And there's always a why question behind this. What am I holding on to? What is the identity? Identities are a powerful lens, right? Like, I want to be a good dad. It's like, what about being a dad? Like, where does that good qualifier come in? Is your starting assumption that you're a bad dad? What don't you just dad? Like, I'm dadding right now. There's no qualifier to dad. I'm just dadding, right? These are identity questions. These are deep identity questions. If you're afraid of being a bad dad or not being a good dad, you have to question that. Like, why is that? Why do I hold that belief? Right? Or why do I hold that identity? So these are the identity questions, right? I told you, like, these are going to move the needle towards your procrastination way more than like putting on like some oral beats and like strapping yourself to your chair and like putting the freedom app so that you can't scroll Twitter, right? Those are just tactics. They're not going to solve this identity conundrum, right? They might help for a moment or two. So, but let's answer it downstream, right? If you have resistance, again, we are not the group that says, wake up at 5 a.m., eat the frog, do Pomodoros, blah, 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 blah. Those are just tactics, right? They work for some people. They probably work for more people than they don't work for. Woohoo. It's a good starting point. But they're just tactics. And again, you have to take them for what they are, tactics, right? They're Band-Aids. There are, for people who do struggle with resistance and procrastination, whether it's, we have an expert on intentional time blocking. Marian is our time blocking expert. There's Pomodoros, there's different ways to withhold, pleasure from yourself in exchange for, charging through a task. James Clear might call this temptation bundling. Like, you can't have a drink unless you exercise that day. And so they work enough, but they're not getting at the root cause of what's actually behind the challenge, which means that eventually you'll go back. You will revert back to your old ways. So, all right, we've got 7 more minutes. So when I'm creating a project within my digital tool, how detailed should my projects be versus using subprojects? The projects versus subprojects question. I don't have an existential answer to this question, so I'll spare you the details on that one. I think that we take probably a more like just-in-time approach to project management. And so, for example, like when we launch our course, right, we used to have one giant project that was, launch Supercharge Your Productivity. And then we broke it down into, market it, deliver it, and then wind it down, I believe, are the different flavors that we have. And so we're not huge believers in like projects versus sub-projects. Instead, it's like making your project structure a little bit more actionable, so you don't have these like never-ending gigantic projects that just like, again, like part of it is here, there's a little bit of like tricking your brain, because if you just see the same project over and over and over, you want to like know that you had the win, like, and we're able to move on to the next one. So, if your projects can be sequenced somewhat linearly, just breaking them into sub-projects And again, I think you'll all find your sweet spot where, maybe like a good project has, between 5 and 20 tasks, right? A project shouldn't have 100 tasks in it. It's probably too big of a project. And you do want to have that momentum that like kind of keeps you going towards the next like mini milestone, right? Human beings work really well in these like little sprints of motivation. And so trying to like, piggyback the momentum into the momentum into the actual like action and progress. Next question. Are there any other books you would advise us to read in order to further develop our knowledge of task management and energy optimization? Ooh. So I think a lot of nonfiction books are just not worth reading. They're just way too long, and you can get the core ideas without reading 250 pages of it. And so my personal approach for any of these, for any nonfiction book, is to go listen to the author on a few podcasts. Then, depending on how big the author is, they probably wrote some op-eds or, some features and, like publications. Read that. They'll usually excerpt a chapter from the book. Obviously YouTube videos, talks, and so on, and then reading like the first couple of chapters and then the last chapter, and then skimming the chapters, chapter headings that are relevant. But books are a weird thing. A slight digression is that human beings are still so primitive that if we saw a really skinny book, we would think it had less value. And we wouldn't buy it. So like no one wants to buy a 50-page book, even though everyone wants to read a 50-page book. And so the reason why books are 300 pages is because we feel that we're getting a lot of value because it's thick. And so the industry has adapted to our primitive brains by creating 300 pages that we don't want to read. Anyway, so that's my rant about nonfiction books. But some books that are good about task management. I open thread. I mean, drop it into the chat. I would say, again, here we're only talking, I'm not gonna give you the why books. The why books are a whole different category. We're talking, Socrates and, the Buddha and, all those folks. We'll spare you those details now. But what are good books that are helpful for time management? Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't say Deep Work is probably one. I'm trying to give you some of the more like underappreciated ones, because you could all see those, like, the Cal Newport books and blah, blah, blah. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But what are some off the radar books that are good on time management? There's a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I think it's Michael Gerber, which is really aimed towards small business owners, but it really is a book on prioritization and strategy, but that's very relevant to your daily lives. There's a book called The Power of Full Engagement, which is by Tony Schwartz, who randomly is Trump's first biographer and also loud critic. But he wrote, I believe him and his partner wrote the book on time management, energy versus time management. It's called The Power of Full Engagement. You could read, there's a 10-page Harvard Business Review article on it. You could just read that and get the gist of the ideas. So that is another one. There's a gentleman by the name of Dan Kennedy. He writes a lot of books on copywriting. He's a little bit off the radar. And so his book is called, I believe it's called Time Management for Mere Mortals. It's actually pretty good. I really like Liz Flossine and Molly Duffy West. Their new book called Big Feelings gets into these questions of perfectionism, procrastination, imposter syndrome, and so on. And they're extremely good visual people. How to Read a Book is a classic on like how to read nonfiction. Basically, you could save a lot of time doing it. I'm trying to think, what are some other Nir Eyal, Indistractable, but that would probably fall into more of the slightly more mainstream genre. The Five Agreements, that's actually more of a why book, but Miguel Ruiz, that's a powerful book. So that's a why book, but it can impact your productivity. So I hope that answers it. There's many, many more. I could talk about this topic for a long, long time. All right, I'm going to do the last one. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get into all the questions, but if you reply to the email with the follow-up email, we'll try our best to answer your questions. All right, last question from Anonymous. 4 upvotes. How many low energy and high energy tasks should I focus on roughly per day? Is there a certain proportion? That's not an easy question to answer, but what I would do is I would try to set a bar for high energy, because you're going to run out of energy. And if you're a morning person, that might be noon for you. If you're a night owl, that might be that window, it's been a long time since I've been a night owl, but the window from 10 to 12 but they're finite windows. So instead of giving you the number of tasks that you could do in the high energy mode, what I would encourage you to do is try to maximize that window as much as you can and really commit to it. Like, don't go on Twitter during your high energy window. Like, you lost if you've done that. And I do that often, so I lose often. Go into your, so make sure you kind of honor your high energy window and protect it ruthlessly. Like, if someone tries to put a meeting, if a client tries to put a meeting there, this is really like kind of non-negotiable stuff. And so push it off unless, it's, your dream unicorn client, then, yes, you will bend the rules for them, but protect that and start small. If you have a job with, a lot of different stakeholders and a boss and so on, just protect, 10 minutes for the first week. And then the next week, protect 30 minutes. And, then you'll get to this point where you might be doing 2-3 hours of 10K work a day. Right. And you'll get there. It will become a part of your habit. And you also see that a lot of the low energy tasks, which is kind of like, maybe they're not even worth doing. Right. You might actually realize that they're just not worth doing. So with that, I thank you all. We have 2 upcoming events. We're going to talk to another entrepreneur called Michael Ashcroft about how to use questions to get unstuck. He's kind of currently in an entrepreneurial rut. So that, I believe, is the 28th, but you'll be getting the email for that. On July 5th, we have our scaling solopreneurship series, where we're going to teach you the 80-20 of SEO. So this is really aimed more towards small business owners that are trying to get to that 10K, that sweet nectar of 10K work by scaling themselves through different compounding vehicles. That'll be on July 5th. And we're trying to run about a free event every other week until our next cohort launches in October. But we're opening up 3 slots only for our Accelerator, which is a weekly paid training every week in perpetuity, and it includes the course in October. So you'll be hearing about that in the follow-up email. Thank you, Marian. Thank you all for the great questions. Good to see so many friends. Good to meet so many new faces. I appreciate you all. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful Tuesday, and I can't wait to see you again soon. Bye, everyone.